Our keynote presenters are folks that you are obviously going to recognize. For a number of years, they came into our homes every evening and on the weekends on the news. Mike and Kim Barnes have been a part of our media world for a very long time, and we feel like they are friends that we've known forever. And they realized a few years ago that they were in the same journey that we all are in as well with their parents. And so they stepped away from the cameras and they created their own organization called Parenting Aging Parents to help all of us and themselves to share our experiences and the lessons that we have learned in caregiving. So today we're going to talk about how we go through this journey, and who better than people who are going through it themselves. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mike and Kim Barnes.
Thank you. It's my mom's birthday this week. She turned 83, and because of that, I made the day trip up to the Dallas area to see her, take her some flowers. And when I went to see her in memory care, she had her usual look at me, and I had to introduce myself like I always do. Hey, Mom, it's me, Mike, your son. Sometimes she follows that up with, I don't recognize you. Sometimes she follows it up with a question, are you my brother? That's not fun. She's the only mom I've ever had. I'm the only son that she's ever had. Going through something like this can be very, very emotional. It can also be frustrating.
I was on my way to a meeting in the car, the phone rings. I happen to look down and I notice it's my mom's bank. I answer the phone. I talk to the nice person who I am on a first name basis with, who says, we just wanted to let you know that your mom just called because she was in an Uber on her way to the bank to withdraw money to help somebody out who needed to buy some gift cards. We just want to let you know that we told her, I think you might should turn around, go home and call your daughter because mom had almost gotten scammed again.
The problem is that there are so many problems out there, and we all have different health conditions, different personalities, different family dynamics. Add that all up, and the number of problems out there that we encounter with our aging parents is limitless. It can range from the person who's in our Parenting Aging Parents group who said, my dad's 89 years old, his dementia's getting worse, he doesn't have a will. What should we do? To the lady who said, Mom needs to go into assisted living, but she can't afford it. So she moved in with me and my family. And now all she does is gripe about the fact that the house isn't clean enough for her. What should we do? There are so many problems out there. But how do we handle them? Because they are so overwhelming.
Sometimes it's a matter of, I think my parents just need a little more interaction and engagement so that I'm not the only entertainment. And it's hard to know, where do you turn for resources?
I like to compare it to having your first child. See if I can get it to change. When we had our first way back in 1997, a long time ago, I'll be honest and tell you that Kim knew how to change a diaper and she had to teach me. Otherwise, we basically had no idea what we were doing. And most people are like that when you have your first child. It's overwhelming. The difference is that when you have that first child, everyone, friends, neighbors, coworkers, relatives, everyone under the sun has advice for you. Here's what to do to help little Junior sleep through the night. Here's what to do when little Junior has gas. Here's what to do to help little Junior roll over, help him crawl, help him walk. The list goes on as the baby gets older. There are so many helpful things because the outlook is positive on the most part. There are a few negatives out there, but basically, the baby's going to grow up and get bigger and better and things are going to improve. It's not like that when you have an aging parent. When you go into a place, whether it's a place full of caregivers, or you go to see some friends, or you go to a party, I don't think I've ever walked in and said, hey guys, yeah, my mom's incontinence is getting worse. It's really messy. I don't know, got any suggestions for Depends? Because it didn't really work. You just don't do that because there's usually not going to be a good outcome. You don't want to break down the party. And it's tough on everybody.
And so what I find that happens instead is that we tend to sort of isolate ourselves. our own little family, our own little situation, and we feel like we need to recreate the wheel because we don't realize that if you just, in most situations, here, of course, everybody's a caregiver, but in most situations, even in your social circles, if you looked around and asked, most everybody is either currently in that situation, maybe it's even with a grandparent instead of a parent, they've been through it before, so they can all relate. And what really started striking me was that I was realizing that I had some really close friends from college, and I didn't even know that one of their moms had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, another one had had brain surgery, because again, it's not something you just think to call your friend and say, hey, interesting news I thought I would share. And so what I really started noticing as we were going through our challenges together is that nobody talks about this. And when we don't talk about it, we can't help each other. And the frustrating part too is that we don't talk about it, even though so many of us are in the thick of it. Just look at some of these statistics. The US Census Bureau estimates that more than 20% of Texas's population will be 60 plus by the year 2030. So the challenges that we have now are going to continue to get even bigger. More than 53 million Americans are providing unpaid care for an adult with health or functional needs. Anyone related here? Anybody providing unpaid care for a loved one? Yeah. Experts estimate that 60% of family caregivers of adults age 50 plus also work a full-time or part-time job. Any workers in the house that work outside the home as well? Raise your hand. A lot. And this is one of the things that we really are trying to change and have an impact in by the fact that we're talking about this, is that 79% of employers are not yet offering benefits to support caregivers caring for aging loved ones. There are lots of opportunities and programs a lot of times for people who have young children, childcare, things like that. We need to start talking about it on the other end because it can absolutely affect people's ability to work and their productivity and their ability just to be able to, one, as an employer, have good employees, but also as the employee to be able to keep your job, because that's in many cases a really important thing to do while you're trying to care for your aging parent as well.
That's on our wish list, our to-do list, is that if we could get employers on that side, because when you have a baby, again, going back to having a baby, when you have a baby, everyone loves it. Even though you're going to say, she's going to take off for 6 weeks, or he's going to take off for some time. Oh, you're having a baby. That's great. We're so excited for you. But if you go to your boss and say, yeah, I'm moving my mom into memory care, I'm going to need about a week off ahead of time to plan and prepare it. It's going to take me some time to get over it. I need to take a couple of weeks off.
Or I need to run right now because mom just fell and I need to go meet her at the emergency room.
Yeah, it's just not looked at in the same way as it is when you have a child. I want to compare it to having a child again, because for those of you who've had children, as Kim and I have, it's not like you wait until the day after they graduate from high school to start talking about,
what are you going to do next?
Are you going to go to college? What does college cost? Do you have to do anything? Do you have to apply? Do you have to take any type of test? What about living conditions? Where are you going to live? If you start that at a very early age, at least the savings part, and in today's school system world, they started, it seems like in middle school, they start talking about college to try and get them ready. But it's not like that when you're talking about an aging adult, an aging parent. Because when things happen, and everything happens to us, I mean, not all at once, but things happen to each and every one of us, we're going to hit a crisis of some sort. It may be memory care, it may be a hip replacement, it may be something with their heart, it may be something worse. Crises happen. We know that, but are you ready for it? Because we get so ready for everything that we know is coming, because we know it's coming with the kids. We know they're going to need a tricycle someday, and they're not going to ride it well, and they may fall. And then a bicycle, and they're really going to fall. And then they're going to get a car, probably get into a wreck. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. You know that different things are going to happen as they get older. It's kind of like a stair step, because you know exactly, roughly, when it's going to happen, depending on their age. It's not like that when you have an aging parent, because it could happen in their 50s. It may not happen until their 90s, depending on their health, depending on the family health history. You just don't know. And that can be so frustrating.
And because as an adult child or a caregiver, we've never done this before. So how would we know all of the things that can be so confusing? You know, today we got a great understanding of the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. but before you walked in the door, and you still may have a lot of questions as to what exactly that means and what's covered and all of that, but there's so much confusion. What's the difference between home health and home health care and just regular home care? They sound pretty similar, don't they? But they're very different, and what kind of services are provided and who pays for it. And even the difference between skilled nursing and rehab. You know, all of these different things can really start making your head spin, and you can kind of get overwhelmed and maybe even frustrated with yourself sometimes, thinking, okay, I'm a pretty smart person. I've been able to pull down a job. Why is this so overwhelming? And it's because we've never done this before. And so it's having to try to find those resources and just the understanding and events like this where you can kind of get that learning so that you can start feeling a little bit more prepared.
Something that I think overwhelms a lot of us are acronyms. Does anyone like acronyms? Do you know what all these stand for? If you ask me, oh, SNF, I'd be saying, sure, Sunday Night Football. Of course. Well, what else would SNF stand for?
Of course.
But that's not the case for all of us.
When Mike came home from taking the tour for his mom, when they were looking for memory care places in the Dallas area, that was actually one of the things he mentioned, is that when they got to the memory care, they just randomly picked a few places that were close to where his dad and mom were living currently, and thought, okay, we'll just go looking at this. We've got all the financials and the legal stuff figured out, so this should be pretty easy, right?
It's like looking for an apartment in my 20s.
Sure. How big's the closet? But yet when he came home, he said, I walked in and all of a sudden they're speaking a language I don't understand. And I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking for, or are there red flags that I missed? I don't know. And so it's so tricky, because when there's all that jargon used, it just makes you go into, you sort of almost just shut down. So whether you're in the care, if you are a service provider in the room, we know we have a lot here. Keep that in mind, that a lot of the people that are walking into your world, this is a brand new world for them, and they don't understand that. And it's such a gift if you can speak in the words and not just in the lingo, because it just can be so overwhelming. And then I think also, as the adult child, one of the things to remember is that when you start hearing those, slow them down and say, excuse me, could I ask a question, or can you clarify that? Because every world has its lingo.
I've had so many people over the last 30 plus years come up to me and say, my son or my daughter really wants to go into TV and be into the news. Can you give them some advice? Well, what do you suggest they do? And I try to keep things simple, try to keep things about, oh, well, as far as picking a college, as far as making a resume tape, as far as practicing. But if you did that to me and you walked up to me and asked me that question, I said, oh, I've got just the thing that they need to do when they put their reel together. Make sure they have a good reveal shot. And then after that, maybe open with the bow shot, maybe a little wrap around, maybe a live look if you can get one, but definitely use some CTs, because people love pulls. News directors love the pulls. And if you have that, well, it'll help the ABI that they go to. And things are going to be great. Oh, just if you have any questions, let me know. What? What did you just say? And you almost have to admit, and it's hard for some of us to admit this, but you almost have to admit, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying. Can you repeat that in layman's terms? And there's nothing wrong with saying that, because when you walk into a memory care place and they start talking about, oh yeah, we've got the SNP here and we've got
ADL.
in case there's a UTI and what? First time I've had a parent do this. I have no idea what you're saying. And again, it makes you so overwhelmed, but you can help it by just admitting to it. I know that's a big step for some of us, because we don't like to admit that we're not as smart as we think we are, but admit that, okay, I don't know what you're saying. Please dumb it down for me.
And as much as we want to ask questions of those providers who might be speaking in gibberish, or what sounds like gibberish, you also want to be thinking and asking the questions of your parents, and thinking about what is the information that I have or don't have that might be helpful. Things like, do you know mom's iPhone password? Now, I'll have a little caveat. The problem is sometimes when you take the password off and they mysteriously pop back on. Anybody had that problem? I was like, Mom,
And they
where'd that password come from? Well, I don't know. I didn't do it. I was like, somebody did. And
that's happened to Kim, I think 3 times in the last 12 months.
yes. So, well, we could have a whole discussion about that. So, but just things like that. So preferably it's one that they've said and they actually know, if you think that they need a password, but things like that. Do you know their password? Do you know their cardiologist's name? That might come in handy. Maybe not today, but it's easier to ask a lot of these questions in advance.
do you know their will? Do you know if they have a will? Do you know there's more than one power of attorney, like VC said earlier? It's stuff like that, that we need to keep on top of things. And we can't wait until they graduate from high school to start talking about college. The earlier that we have these conversations with our parents, the better. I've had a will and a power of attorney of my dad's, my mom and dad's, in a little safe in my closet for 30 plus years. I don't really need this. Why are you giving me? You're in your 50s. Why are you giving me this? But I've had it just in case. Still haven't need to use it, but just in case I need to, it's there. And it gives me peace of mind now, especially knowing that they're 85 and 83, and my mom's not doing good. It's good to know that you have it. Again, the crisis will come. I don't mean to be the pessimist saying that. The crisis will come, but how can we make it be instead of up here, down here, or way down here? That's what we try to do.
And so much of that is going to be having conversations and asking questions. And one of the first things that we like to think about when we're talking about preparing is we bring up siblings. Because while it seems obvious that we want our siblings to all be on the same page, there's a lot of funny things that happen in families. Would you agree? Family dynamics. And what I think is so fascinating is that all of the things that maybe were issues when kids were little, whether it's who's the favorite or who's the one that always gets away with everything or who's the whatever, those kinds of things come crashing back like tenfold sometimes when we're now all adults dealing with our parents. And so it's really important to think of being aware of that, because you have to kind of navigate that. And the other hard part too is every family is different. And so how can we be on the same page and play to our strengths?
And no one has it easy, because if you're an only child, yes, you don't have to worry about siblings, but that means you have to do almost all the work.
And make all the decisions.
If there are 5 or 6 kids in the family, wow, great, you have a big family. That means you can spread the work out amongst each other, right? Sometimes it's not that easy. Yes, talked to a lady. We had a support group meeting in parenting aging parents this week on Zoom. And one of the ladies in the group said, I've got 3 brothers and sisters, and they will have nothing to do with me or my parents anymore. Nothing. They don't help me at all. It's like, that's so sad. But do your best to see if you can talk to all of your siblings to try to get on the same page. Pretty close. You're not going to be exact. Everyone's going to have something a little bit different. But the more alike you are, the better it's going to be.
We had one woman in our parenting aging parents community who shared with me that they actually called a sibling meeting. And when she meant siblings, she meant no in-laws allowed. So the sisters-in-law and the brothers-in-law weren't allowed, because that often affects the sibling. Would you agree? So if you can have just the siblings, because we're trying to do what's best for mom and dad, and I don't necessarily want to take into consideration what his wife is saying or what her husband is saying, because we want to make these decisions on our own. So you have to really figure out what's going to work best for your family, and also knowing kind of what works best within that family. I know that there are certain things that if my brother shares with my mom, she hears it in a much different way than if I say it. I'm going to be the one that she calls, as she did as I was about to get a facial. My phone rings, and the cute esthetician was so funny. And I'm saying, okay, now mom, okay, just go up to the top of the menu bar. Okay, just click on that and then hit enter so it'll refresh the page. Oh, no, don't erase it. Okay, and just girls listening, and I said, oh yeah, now what are you doing on the computer? She's like, oh, I'm just trying to get to my solitaire game. I was like, oh, okay, great. So, I mean, I guess I shouldn't have answered the phone if I didn't want to have to answer, solve the issue, but it's those are the kinds of things, those are the questions that I get but I know that if we need to say, mom, we need to do this, sometimes it's better heard from my brother, and that's just the way it is. So it's good just to know, again, play to the strengths of the siblings when you can.
Sometimes playing to the strengths doesn't work. I admit that, and I've got a great story to tell you about that. My dad, we moved my mom into memory care March of 21, so almost exactly 2 years ago, March the 8th. And in August, my dad, he'd been slowing down a little bit, but he'd been very depressed because he wasn't with his wife anymore. Now, my mom was a mile and a half away, and he went to go visit her 2 or 3 times a week, and it helped, but he was sad. They've been married for Monday is actually their 63rd wedding anniversary, this upcoming Monday. So at the time, they've been married for 61 years. They weren't together anymore. My dad loves my mom. It was hard on him. So as he's slowing down, my sister and I kind of thought, well, it's just because he's a little depressed. It's going to be okay, but he's a little bit depressed. Well, my sister took him to a doctor's appointment just for a little checkup. Not a regular checkup, because I usually go to those, but just to make sure everything's okay. Go to the doctor, and doctor checks him out, runs some tests, and says, yeah, it looks okay. I'll let you know if anything happens. Going home and just do this and do that. So my sister takes my dad back to independent living, goes back, she lives 5 miles away, goes back to her house. As soon as she gets to her house, she gets a phone call from the doctor. Diane, you need to take your dad to the emergency room now. He needs a pacemaker. My sister's like, okay. Goes, picks up my dad.
That's probably what she did.
Yes. Takes him to the hospital, just outside of Dallas. And it's during one of the heights of COVID. This is August of 21. There's no room in the hospital. And the cardiologist wasn't working that day, or he was already off for the day. So they're talking to my dad about, well, we could try to find a room for you, but I don't know if we can. It may just be easier if you go home. And my sister's like, Dad, you need to stay. You need to stay. No, I think I'm going to go home. Dad, hold on. I'm going to get brother on the phone. Mike, talk to your dad. He wants to leave the hospital. It's the day before my birthday in August. I'm with Kim and our 2 kids who are in their 20s, and they're taking me out to dinner. I'm in the parking lot. I'm on the phone. Dad, why are you doing this? Well, I just
Surgery will be in the morning. They'll do the surgery in the morning.
He'll be there in the morning. Dad, please, please. I do not want to wake up on my birthday in the morning and find out that you died because you left the hospital. Do you understand that? Yeah. Please, Dad, please. Can you please do that to me? I do not want to ruin my birthday by finding out something bad happened to you. Please. Okay, son. Okay. I can do that. Thank you. They'll take care of it tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Dad. Okay. He hangs up, looks at my sister and says, take me home. That's my dad. We're used to that. But sometimes, even when you're playing to the emotion, I have a great relationship with him. So does my sister. And yet he still didn't really care. But you have to play to not only your strengths, but play to their strengths. Because when we talked to him, gosh, it was the fall of 19, when we first started talking to my dad about mom's Alzheimer's is getting worse. She started showing signs about 10 years ago, slowly getting worse. Yeah, we're bad enough to where she couldn't cook anymore. So my dad would take her out to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which was fine, but it started wearing on him. So that's when my sister and I talked to him about, we need to move you from a house. They live about an hour outside of Dallas, from the house to independent living. And my dad's first thought was, okay, whatever y'all say, but this is gonna be like a nursing home where his dad lived his last 2 years of life. It doesn't sound like fun. Then he saw what independent living looked like. Son, this is the best move we ever made. This is great. He loved it. Well, now mom's Alzheimer's is getting worse. And even though dad wasn't cooking, didn't have to cook because the meals were provided, he's still taking care of her 24/7. It was wearing on him. It wasn't good for my mom. And we told him, mom needs to move to memory care. If this was cancer, if this was a heart problem, we would do what's best for her to make sure it's not going to fix things, but make sure that her life is better. Her life is easier. She's taken care of better than she is right now. And he said, you're right. I agree. And to this day, it's been almost 2 years. Every week he says, son, you and your sister made the right choice. I'm so glad y'all picked the place you did. Mom is in the best place. I'm so glad. Which reaffirms that. But he did that because he loves her so much. Different than when he says, oh, take me home. I don't care about this. But he loves his wife so much that he would do anything for her. That is why it works. So not only do you play your strengths, play to their strengths. Think about their relationship, their upbringing, their background, whatever it is, play to whatever works best with them.
And part of it Mike mentioned too is the housing situation. That was a big move for his parents. And that talking about that housing before it becomes a crisis. They didn't talk about, we need to move to independent living or even to memory care, and it happened the very next day. Moved to memory care, actually, we took like a year and a half, actually, they found the place. That's a whole other story. But you have to start having those conversations as early as possible. You need to find out from your parents, what would your desires be? Would you like to live at home? Would you like to live in a community? Would you prefer to live with us? What are your desires? But I think it's also really important to talk to continue that conversation, to say, okay, we know your desires, but also what are you open to? Because sometimes what your desire is not feasible. You heard all those prices earlier, and it's staggering how expensive it is for independent living and even assisted living, memory care. And so, you have to kind of find out from your parent, okay, if all things are equal, this is what you really prefer. But if things are hard, if I'm still working a full-time job and can't necessarily care for you 24/7, what are you open to? And I think that those conversations are great to have as early as possible, because you just don't know how things will change. Quick story from my mom. December of he's my numbers guy, 2019. We mentioned to mom at Christmas, because she was no longer driving. She was living in a house by herself. She's single, and was taking Uber for a while to be able to go play bridge and do things like that. But that was really not working well, and taking herself to the bank, which was not a great idea either. So we decided that Uber wasn't really a great long-term solution. So we thought, and she's a very active person, she likes participating. So an independent living kind of environment would be perfect for her, because there's things to do all the time. But even still, and she knows that about herself, but even still, I mentioned it at Christmas. Hey mom, do you think you'd be open to just, going to look at a few places? Nope. Oh, okay. I'm not leaving this house. I said, oh, okay, well, this is going to get interesting, isn't it? Because by that point, we had noticed a little bit of early onset dementia, but again, not driving and any of that. What was interesting, though, is that my uncle came in town in January, her brother, for an event, and he was the one who suggested, hey, Dee, I've got a list of a couple of places. What if we just go take a look at them? Just drive by. Well, I don't know. Well, come on, we'll just go do it. And her brother suggested. So she said, okay, let's do that. Well, then 2 days later, and I'm out of town actually during this time, I called my mom to let her know I'm coming in town for a funeral. And I said, I want to let you know I'm coming. She said, oh, perfect. I can show you where I'm moving. And I about did that. I was like, huh? Come again? She said, oh yeah, I'm moving on April 15th. And I said, you are you? Okay, so did you talk to my brother about this? Oh yeah, no, I need to call him because I signed the lease yesterday. Great, okay. So then, on the one hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you that this was her decision, her choice, and kind of her taking action, so that it doesn't have to be an ugly or, difficult, frustrating thing. Quickly said, okay, mom, let's not sign any other legally binding documents, please, without having talked to one of us at least. She said, I just didn't want to bother you while you're out of town. So, okay, great. So all that to say, what was interesting in that scenario was that a little nudge from her brother was heard much differently than the nudge from me or my brother. So those are, again, kind of looking at, it doesn't have to be just the siblings. It doesn't have to be just the spouse. Are there other family members that can come in and be alongside these decisions as well?
And of course, part of the housing situation is finances. And finances is big to know, because if you don't know what your parents' finances are, it's hard for you to make decisions. If you pick out an independent living place, oh my gosh, I found the perfect place. It's only $4,000 a month. This is going to be great. And they say, we make $2,500 combined Social Security every month, and that's it. How are we going to pay for this? What are they going to do? It doesn't mean that you have to have exactly down to the penny what they have. And also know that your parents could change. My dad was an accountant. He worked for the same company for 49 years, a commercial real estate firm. And he was very, 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 very private about money. I mean, incredibly private. I had no idea how much money he made as I was growing up. when I was in high school, we went to go buy a car one time. And while we're there, the person at the dealership says, okay, we need to fill this stuff out, Mr. Barnes. First of all, how much money do you make? And my dad looks at him and says, how much do I need to make to buy this car? And the guy said, well, about 75,000. Okay, put that down. We leave, he gets on the phone, didn't have cell phones back then, we get home, and he calls the lady at the office and says, you're gonna get a phone call? Yeah, tell him this. Really? Well, now, in his 80s, he gives my sister and me, basically, spreadsheets showing where all of their money is, how much money they have, so we know what they can afford. So that when my sister and I went and looked at memory care places, to be completely transparent with you, they paid over $4,000, my dad still does, for independent living. The memory care place was going to be about $5,500. We knew that he could afford it. But we also have to think about their background, their upbringing, and the fact that my dad has to write checks, combined 2 checks a month for more than $9,000 for my mom and him to live. That's more money than he made in an entire year at his job back in the 60s. Which, okay, yes, times have changed in the last 60 years since then. I understand that. But think about where they are, what they're going through, and their memories about things. And they're, wow, I can't believe I just wrote 2 checks that total $9,300. I made $9,000 in 1963. This is hard to do. That type of thing. It's hard for them sometimes to not accept that, but to live with that, because it's such a change. It was the same thing when my sister and I, after mom moved into, right before mom moved into memory care, we suggested that they sell the house that they've lived in for, gosh, 20 years. That was out in the country, because my dad was still trying to keep up with him. He was still mowing the yard. He was 80 years old. I said, Dad, you don't need to do that. Mom can't go there anymore. You need to sell the house. And he was open to it. He did. And the day after he sold it, he's on the phone with me and he says, I just feel weird right now. I said, how come? I don't own anything. But Dad, you have the money. Money's in the bank. Yeah, but son, I don't own anything. And think about that. Someone who was born in the 30s or the 40s, it was a big deal. It is now too, but back then it was a big deal to own something. It meant something to people. It's like a status symbol. He'd owned a house of some sort since 1963. He didn't own anything. He had the money in the bank, but he didn't own anything. So think about how things like that, the financial things, affect your parents just from their upbringing, the way that they've been raised.
And not that you have to get into all the nitty gritty, because there sometimes is resistance if your parent is still very financially capable and cognitively capable to manage all their finances. They may not want to get, you don't want to think that you're trying to get all in their business. But the more you have just of the picture of that, the easier it will be, because you'll know, do they have debt that you didn't know about? What is their lifestyle, and what kind of care might they need? Because that definitely impacts what options are available. Just as you heard earlier, if you don't have if you have a long-term care insurance policy, maybe there are these options. If you don't have that, there are these options. If you don't have savings, things like that, you don't have pensions, that can dictate so many of these other decisions, unfortunately. And also with finances, the more you can kind of be aware, or that they'll allow you to be a part of it, can also really help them as well. My mom has been scammed multiple times. And only now, because we were able to approach it from a perspective of, Mom, it's not your fault, because these scammers are really scammy, for lack of a better word, and manipulative, and they know how to trick you. It's no wonder that you fell prey to this, because you're nice and I know you wanted to help them. Because what I realized is that second time when the banker called me, had I made her feel bad or made her feel dumb about it, she likely wouldn't have told the bank, who wouldn't have told me to have stopped that. So that was one little thing. And I will be totally honest, I'm not always the most patient person. You know how like with your kids, when you want to say, what were you thinking? And obviously they weren't, right? When they made some sort of silly decision. I realized Mom, what were you thinking? clicking on telling that somebody tells you that they need you to go to Best Buy and buy gift cards, and you'll just type in the codes for them and they'll transfer money into your bank account since you've now given them your bank account. Like, huh? Like how, like again, when you think logically, that doesn't make any sense, but they're just so manipulative and sneaky. So because of that, we ended up having to appeal to her to take the checkbook away. And she, I will tell you, is not always super happy about that. But we just felt like in the interest of her being able to not get taken advantage of, that had we not been a part of that, we wouldn't have known that. We hear the saddest stories in our community, in our Facebook group, of people whose parents have gotten scammed out of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because their family didn't have any idea what was going on. So it's that fine line between being overly nosy, but also being aware, because I mean, that just losing $100,000 changes everything, right? Changes everything. Losing $10,000 can change everything. So really thinking about how do those finances play into ways that we can better, the more we know, the better we can help our parents.
We talked a little bit about legal earlier, VC did. So the biggest thing to know about the legal documents, will, the durable and the medical power of attorney, medical directive, a HIPAA release, things like that. Know that by the time you need it, it's too late. It's like, oh my gosh, I need a HIPAA because mom's in the hospital and they won't tell me anything. It's probably too late for them to sign it. You need the power of attorney. It's probably too late. That's one of the biggest things, where there are other things you can kind of make up the ground, like, ooh, start a little bit late on this. Anything legal, be on the forefront, get ahead of the game.
And there are different things. I know we talked briefly earlier about the two different types of powers of attorney, the durable and the medical, which both allow for different uses. The HIPAA release that Mike mentioned, medical directives, there's a disposition of bodily remains. That's an important one as well. But those are things that, and wills, we didn't even talk about wills or trusts, but wills especially are so important. I just heard the saddest story just the other day. A neighbor of mine whose 90-year-old wife died. She had a son, he had sons, they'd been married for more than 20 years. She was a very smart woman, very accomplished, smart woman, but just kept always thinking, well, we'll get to that. Well, because there are, and this is such a factor in families now, where there are stepchildren and maybe former stepchildren and all of that, he found out that because Texas is a community property state, now even his pension from him working all those years is potentially half of the property of his stepchildren, if that makes sense, technically. So again, it just gets super complicated. And even, we certainly would advise that you go to an attorney and all of that, but even something that's, any kind of will is going to potentially be better than nothing. And that can alleviate so much trouble. And for this one family in particular, it had taken a year to even get to probate. So if you're trying to manage a property and pay property taxes and all of this, and all that money is tied up, it can really create a lot of havoc. And I know they briefly mentioned about guardianship too. So complicated. And so definitely, that's something that you only want to have to really go down that road if it's a last resort, because it just is not. It's really complicated and really expensive, a lot more expensive than spending the amount of money that you might need to have somebody put a will together for you.
So these first four things that we mentioned about talking to your siblings, the finances, the housing, and the legal, sounds like, oh, well, sure. Okay, we need to do that, but sure. The last one you may laugh at, but it's actually pretty important. It's passwords. What are their passwords into things? Whether it's their alarm code in their house, the password to get into their computer so you can see their email, password to get into their email, passwords to get into different accounts. I've got a 2-page list of passwords of my dad. Sometimes he'll call me saying, son, what's my password for this? But the passwords can be so important because, again, by the time you need it, it's too late. Because if mom or dad goes into the hospital, or something even worse happens to them, or they're just not around to be able to talk to them about it, and you need to do something, how do you do it? If you can't get into whatever the device is, whether it's an iPhone or a computer or an iPad, or even something in their house, their safety deposit key. Do they have safety deposit box? Where's the key? Stuff like that. You need to know things like that just in case.
Those can also come in handy just on a practical basis, even regularly. I have my mom's email open in my computer almost all the time, and I go in and check it at least once or twice a day because she gets so much spam. If PayPal sends her another thing that says, PayPal, thanks for your purchase of this iPhone of $900. If you don't agree, click here, or Norton, or PayPal, Norton, all of these, Amazon. Yes, I don't have an Amazon account. I know, Mom. Who's it really to? Oh, yeah, that's not me. Okay, who's it really from? Oh, 7803 at AOL.com. Okay, that is not AT&T. So just having to, some of it's trying to help train them. And we've trained both of our parents pretty well about they just forward emails to us if they look a little bit questionable, which is better than accidentally clicking on something. But I'll go in and check her email, and that way I can delete a lot of stuff, mark that as spam, and hopefully help her not get any more than she already does that might be potentially manipulative and be able to get in. But it also lets me be able to go in and I can check her Discover bill. I can check her bank account and just make sure that there aren't any outstanding charges. I've seen political donations that have shown up that I'm like, Mom, do you have a charge on your credit card for a political donation? No, I don't. Well, somebody, yes, you do. So it's just those things that it just allows you to be able to come in, step in and be able to help pay bills, things like that.
I'm sorry to tell stories about your mom and political donations.
Oh gosh, yeah, don't get started. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so when do we have these conversations?
Yeah, you have all these topics that you're going, Mike, you don't know my dad, or you don't know my mom. It's hard. How am I supposed to do this? But again, you have to play to their strengths and your strengths about having these conversations. I joked we were on a TV show on a newscast being interviewed in Oklahoma City a couple of weeks ago, and I said, and they asked this question about, well, when do we have these conversations? So how about if you say, hey, I just watched this great interview on TV, and let's talk about these questions that they brought up. It could be the same thing about watching us today. It could be because it's my birthday. Let's talk about this. It's your birthday. Let's talk about that. Find an excuse, find any reason to start the conversation. And if you start it in a casual way, again, depending on your parent, but if you start it in a casual way, a lot of times they're more receptive and say, we need to talk about having a power of attorney.
Let's have that talk.
Today. Because that's the time when they're going to say, I'm not giving you a power of attorney. You're just trying to take all my money. Because we have so many people in our group who say that. I'm not filling out a will. You're just trying to get the money from me. No, I'm not going to get it until you die anyway. No, it's just, it'll make things easier on me. So do you play to the strength of, it would be a gift to me. A gift, not the money, just having a will or having a power of attorney, having a medical directive, whatever it is. It would be a gift to me. How many parents want to give gifts to their children to make life better for their children? And that's what any of these legal documents would be any of the housing discussions would be, the financial discussions, the password discussions. They're all going to make things easier on me, but maybe that's not your parents' personality. Maybe you need to turn it around and make things, okay, I want to make things better for you. Find what's the strength to get that conversation started.
And I think that the more that they can also feel like this is coming from a place of love and care, I want to be able to serve you and help you, and this will make this easier to do that, can sometimes work too. Again, you just have to sort of figure out what might work best for your parent. But I think it's so overwhelming when you find yourself in this boat, in this situation, and you just think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that really was, that overwhelm that we were feeling was when Mike came home from that one trip and he said, I felt really overwhelmed. I think we should do something to help people. And I said, oh, okay, well, what do you think we should do? And so that's where Parenting Aging Parents started, was just the fact of, can we normalize the conversation so that people will talk about it, so that we can work together.
And truthfully, when I came up with the idea, I thought, well, we're former newscasters. We've interviewed literally thousands of people in our careers. So let's use that gift to help people. Let's interview lawyers about powers of attorney and wills. Let's talk to doctors about different things. Let's talk to Medicare specialists, Medicaid specialists. Let's talk to Alzheimer's specialists. Let's talk to people about
Downsizing.
dealing with downsizing. There's so many subjects and so many problems out there. So the number of interviews we can do is limitless. But let's do that, and we can put that onto the Facebook page so that it's not just, okay, let's open up a forum and y'all get to talk and vent and complain. No, but this way you have at least an idea, because everything's different. So when you see about compassion fatigue or untangling Alzheimer's or scams on seniors, yours is a little bit different. But you have an idea about, oh, let me go talk to this person to get a better grasp of what is happening right now with mom or dad.
It's all often the things that you don't even know that you need to know about. And also those expert interviews can also be a good resource that if you're trying to get a parent to learn a little bit more about a subject, let them watch that. Again, as Rob talked about earlier, having that third party sometimes it makes it feel like it's not you telling them something or suggesting something. It's letting somebody else share that as well. And one of the things that we found quickly within this online community that now has grown to almost 5,300 people from the Austin area and around the country, even a few people from around the world, some Australians and Canadians as well, is that what we've discovered is that when we do talk about things, we can help each other. One of my very favorite stories is somebody in our group had a mom with Alzheimer's. Her birthday was coming up and her favorite thing all of her life was to go to the beach. And so she posted in the group, hey, does anybody have an idea? We want to take our mom to the beach for her birthday. She might not remember, but this will be just a great memory. Does anybody have some suggestions? Somebody else just happened to know and suggest, hey, did you know that at Port Aransas, there is a beach wheelchair you can just reserve? All you do is you go in and you reserve it. And a couple weeks later, we see this. And it was, it brings me chills every time I see this picture, because this created a memory for this family that she didn't remember ever having gone to the beach when they got home, when the caregiver said, hey, how was the beach? And she said, beach? I didn't go to the beach. But the family, because she passed away about 6 months after this, the family has that image etched into their brain. And they will always have that. And it was just because one person knew one thing that could help somebody else.
Because we like to say, we're all in this together, which is true. I have different quotes from people who are in our group, but that's the biggest thing you have to know. And people understand that you can't do this by yourself. You have to have some type of help. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a support group, maybe it's parenting aging parents, something so that you're not alone.
And when you find those things that work for you, it's also helpful to find places to sort of keep all that information. One of the things that I found personally that I needed was a place to keep track of all this stuff, because I kept getting questions from the doctor. Oh, when did mom have a shingles vaccine? Mom, when did you have a shingles vaccine? Oh, I probably did. Well, that's not very helpful. So now so we created this guide, which is basically all the information that you might not even realize that is important and helpful to have, so that you can keep it all in one place. And that's the caregiver's key that selfishly I created for me, but we share it with other people too.
Yeah, with information about housing, finances, insurance, medical stuff, all kinds of things. Because again, there's so much stuff out there. There are so many things that you need to know to keep from being overwhelmed. And it is so easy to get overwhelmed. When I visited my mom on Monday, I drove up to see her, and again, she didn't recognize me first, but then she saw the flowers and she had the biggest smile because I took her flowers. And we sat down, and I explained who I was, and we had a great conversation. And I was there for an hour, and in that hour, I didn't keep track, but I'd say probably 20 times I mentioned the fact that you're turning 83. How old am I going to be? You'll be 83 on Wednesday, Mom. 83. And next week is your 63rd wedding anniversary. How many years? 63, Mom. How many years have we been married now? 63, Mom. You and Dad, 63 years. 20 times each. Because she can't remember. She has no memory. And that can wear you down. And what really could have worn me down was at the very end. Somebody tried to come in, we were in a little library, I guess you could say, reading area, room, and somebody who lived at memory care banged on the door, opened up the door, and came in and acted like they wanted to talk to me. I have no idea who they were. Wanted to talk to me. And Mom's like, what? It flushed my mom. They left, somebody who worked there took the person away. And I said, oh, Mom, let me take a quick picture before I've got to go. Took a quick selfie, me and my mom and the flowers. And I stood up, and when I stood up, Mom looked at me and said, how long have we been married? I said, you and Dad have been married 63 years. And she gave me this sad look. She said, you're not my husband? I said, no, Mom, I'm your son. Where's my husband? Oh, Mom, he was here earlier today. She was. But where is he? He went back to assisted living. How long have we been married? 60. We went on a little cycle for the next 5 minutes before I left. That's not fun. It's tough. But you have to not worry about what's missing. And it's hard to do. You have to fall back on and love what's still there. Keep loving what's still there. And my mom's love for me, I know it's still there because it came out in that hour conversation I had with her. Focus on that. Whatever the problem is that you're dealing with, Alzheimer's, heart problems, Parkinson's, whatever it is, it's painful because of what's missing, but try to focus on what's still there. We are Parenting Aging Parents. You can find us at parentingagingparents.com. That'll lead you straight to the Facebook group. And if you have any questions, we're always around to try to help. Thank you very much.